As Game of Thrones approaches the end, I'm seeing a lot of predictions on who lives and who dies, or who ends up where. And while those are important parts of the ending, what's always interested me the most is how characters grow and solve internal conflict to reach their conclusion. In Season 8, each character will be confronted with death, and the choices they make in the face of that confrontation will define who they really are. So today I'm going to be a nerd and go through each character, predicting what their main arc will be in the final season, how that arc will resolve, and where that resolution will lead. So let's spin the wheel and see who's up first. As the story draws to a close, Jaime has turned away from Cersei and resolved to do what he thinks is right. And while that's an honorable path to take, choosing to do what's right doesn't immediately undo the hurt a person has caused or the enemies a person has made. Hence, I expect Jaime will have to rally the Tully forces that he formerly subjugated at Riverrun, and fight for the living at Winterfell. Thus, Jaime will not only be facing death, but the sins of his past.
I want to know, I truly do. How do you live with yourself?
Anyways, House Lannister is doomed, so to die fighting for the living could be Jaime's sad but honorable end. That said, Jaime has always been messy, so the only other place the story could go is to return to the Red Keep and be the Valonqar that kills Cersei. This will be a much more grim and tragic ending for Jaime Lannister. Now, this is something a lot of people are expecting, so I can't deny the possibility. But I personally hope that Jaime will be spared from that fate, and that he'll be allowed to die doing something he can be proud of. Besides, there's something kind of misogynistic about having Jaime heroically kill his former lover. So I actually hope that we're all spared from that. Jon Snow's final season arc will revolve around how he responds to the reveal of his parentage, and how he synthesizes the identity of Aegon Targaryen with that of Jon Snow. I have a more detailed video on Jon, but I expect his identity crisis will start with some existential angst over having lived a lie, and some ruminations on what it would mean to be king. Then, Jon will be faced with death, and the news that he is going to be a father to Daenerys' child. This will remind Jon what really matters, and make all of those answers fall into place. And so we'll get to see Jon do some dragon riding and fight the Night King. As for where he ends up, the question of whether Jon will be king is tough, but I'm gonna say no. I think House Targaryen's reign over Westeros is done, and Jon's destiny may really be to wear no crowns. Arya's arc will revolve around how she resolves the questions of vengeance and identity. For better or worse, Arya's list has been a big part of what has kept her going. And though she set it aside temporarily, Arya will be tempted one last time to pursue vengeance against Queen Cersei.
I'm going to kill the Queen.
However, revenge hasn't exactly been a healthy pursuit for Arya, so I expect she'll let go of her list and instead help to evacuate the innocent people of King's Landing. In the books, Arya's desire for vengeance is externalized through Lady Stoneheart, and by giving her undead mother the gift of mercy, Arya can begin laying to rest her darker impulses. While on the show there is no Lady Stoneheart, the Hound has taken a similar role, and thus his death might serve the purpose of helping a girl move forward. And speaking of moving forward, since childhood, Arya's life has been ruled by war and loss. So when the war is over, Arya will have to figure out again who she is. Assassin or lady? A lone wolf or part of a pack? I expect Arya's bittersweet ending will be to accept the title she resisted as a child. Like her direwolf Nymeria and the warrior queen she's named for, Arya will have to grow into leadership and accept both the sacrifice and responsibility that comes with having a pack of her own. Which is why I think Arya will be Lady of Winterfell. By her own admission, Melisandre is doomed. So, she'll return from Volantis to fight the Night King, bringing with her an army of Lord of Light worshippers known as the Fiery Hand, who are probably going to die when King's Landing goes up in flames. But look on the bright side, Melisandre might get to meet the Lord of Light after all. On some level, Theon's arc might have already reached its inspiring conclusion, when he resolved to live by his convictions and do right by the people that matter to him. Now, he just has to rescue his sister and then try his best not to die in the Great War. It's hard to say whether he'll survive, but I personally hope that Theon does. In the show, the Ironborn have effectively seceded from the Seven Kingdoms, making Yara a queen in her own right. Now in the books, there's an old Ironborn tradition where the Iron Islands have joint rule between a Rock King and a Salt King, where one rules the land and the other rules the sea. So, if Theon survives, it might be interesting to see him take up the role of Rock King, while Yara rules as the Salt Queen. Or he'll die. Actually, no. Just kidding.
What is dead may never die!
As the best character on the show, it's going to be fascinating watching the world fall apart for Cersei Lannister. Queen Cersei's attempt to use the war between the living and the dead to her advantage is bound to fail, and inevitably, Cersei will have the living and the dead fighting in her own front yard. Thus, Cersei will lose her kingdom, her city, her army, and even her child. In the end, Cersei's final transformation will be the shift from fighting for a future for herself to embracing the apocalypse and fighting to spite the world. So, the question remains, who will be the one to finish Cersei Lannister? Well, I'm gonna say Tyrion, because I think we choose our own Valonqars. Having begun her story hoping for a fairy tale wedding, Sansa's arc has been about coming to understand a responsibility to her family, learning to effectively wield soft power, and casting aside idealistic notions about the world. So, the resolution of her story will revolve around accepting that no one place or institution will keep her safe, and only by trusting in her wits and learning to see all ends can she protect her family and herself.
Don't fight in the north or the south. Fight every battle, everywhere, always. In your mind, everyone is your enemy, everyone is your friend.
While everyone is focused on the supernatural threat to the north, Sansa seems to be the character most cognizant of the threat still posed by human evil. Thus, I predict we'll see Sansa navigate some complex alliances, and perhaps turn the Golden Company against Cersei. In the end, Sansa's story will resolve in the bittersweet choice to leave Winterfell and represent her family's interests in the south, not as anyone's bride, but as the independent and fearless Lady Stark. Davos has been pretty static for the last couple seasons, so it's hard to say whether he has a big change coming his way. If anything, it probably comes down to whether or not Davos will retire from public life. My guess is that Davos will be Hand of the King, mainly because it'll be interesting for Westeros to have a man from outside the nobility running the show for a change. Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Bran is tricky, because on the show it's an open question how much capacity for personal growth he still has. After his last conversation with Mira Reed, we have to wonder how much humanity he has left, and whether he sees any value in individual life. Which points to what's really the only possible arc Bran can have. If he has any character development at all, it'll be to find balance between the identity of Brandon Stark and that of the Three-Eyed Raven, and to see value in individual humanity. And while it's possible that our time-traveling bird boy will be relegated to a plot device, remember that technically, even the godlike Dr. Manhattan had a character arc.
Suddenly you discover humanity. Convenient.
Anyways, I have a whole video on Bran burning down King's Landing, so be sure to check that out. As for where Bran will end up when it's all over, well, I don't expect him to die any more than he already has, and he's abdicated as Lord of Winterfell, so it seems like he'll just be an old man in a tree?
He won't be an old man in a tree.
Oh. Well then, I guess he'll be king of Westeros.
Long may he reign!
The Hound's conclusion will be all about redeeming the ideal of knighthood by standing up for a worthy cause. In the end, Sandor will have to face his fear of fire and the inner demons that fear represents. This will be accomplished at Clegane Bowl, when the Hound is brought face to face one last time with the undead shell of his brother, who just so happens to have a weakness against fire. As for where he ends up, I expect that Clegane Bowl might prove fatal for Sandor, and his story will end in him and Arya sharing a final goodbye. On several occasions, Missandei has brought up the possibility of returning to the Isle of Nath if her service to Daenerys ever came to an end. So, when this is all over, someone will be getting on a ship and going to Nath. And I think that person will be Grey Worm. Sadly, I think Missandei will die, and Grey Worm will take the Unsullied to protect the Isle of Nath as a way to honor her memory. For Dany, it's going to be all about how Jon's parentage undermines her claim, as well as the incoming revelation that she is going to have a child. Jon being the rightful heir to the throne is going to complicate Jon and Dany's relationship. That, coupled with the Night King co-opting her dragon to bring death upon the Seven Kingdoms, will force Daenerys to rethink her ambition. So, I predict Jon will be taken hostage by Cersei.
If they want another Stark prisoner, they can come and take me.
And Daenerys will have to weigh the life of the person she loves against her ambition, as she comes to see the full destructive consequences of the pursuit of power. Also, Dany and Jon's child will be the prince or princess that was promised, and a target for the Night King himself. Thus, how Daenerys fights for the future of the life growing inside her will not only represent the fight for life itself, but also mirror the struggle that she herself had to endure coming into the world a target of a king's wrath.
She dies.
Ultimately, I get the vibe from the House of the Undying that Daenerys' destiny is not the Iron Throne, but rather something truly mystical. The ending of Dany's final season will mirror the ending of her first season, and we'll get to see her walk through fire one last time, and once again bring something new into the world. As a spy master who prides himself on knowledge, the final season will confront Varys with the unknown, and the fallout of the dragons he's worked so hard to bring to Westeros. Thus, I predict the Spider's death will be wrapped up in the supernatural, ironically taking place in the tunnels beneath the Red Keep that he knows so well. As King's Landing burns, we'll get an answer to the mystery of his childhood trauma, seeing through a flashback what the voice was that spoke to him from the flames, and what the voice said. My prediction, the voice was Bran, or future Varys channeled through Bran, and the voice will either say, "Burn them all!" or,
"I'm not the one doing it."
The resolution of Tyrion's story will revolve around the conflict between the love he has for his two families, the one he was born into and the one he chose. When these two sides come to an impasse, Tyrion will be torn apart. Season 7 saw Tyrion trying to put Daenerys into power and establish her legacy, while also racked with guilt over the loss he brought upon his family. So, in his private audience with Cersei, Tyrion likely made a secret deal in an attempt to broker peace, where Tyrion offered that Cersei and Jaime's child could perhaps be Daenerys' heir, at this time believing her unable to have children.
You're pregnant.
However, those hopes will fall apart as Cersei continues to be an antagonizing force and Daenerys produces an heir of her own. Despite his good intentions, Tyrion is doomed to bring both sides to ruin, betray both families, and be remembered as the vile, devious imp. Like Machiavelli, Tyrion's story will end in exile. Maybe someday, though, Tyrion will be the one to put the events of Game of Thrones into writing and tell the world his side of the story. Anyways, those were just my quick predictions. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more detail on anyone in particular, or if you have predictions of your own. Also, this channel is pretty new, but be sure to check out my other videos, and subscribe if you'd like to see me keep this going. Anyways, Thanks for watching.